Welcome to Parenting Tips with Dr. Glow on the WDKX podcast network, where the conversation never ends. I'm reminding you that education is in my DNA. There was an article written by Catherine Lee a few years ago, and the name of that article was Seven Ways or Seven Common Kids Behaviors that we as parents need to address early. Because if we don't, it will be harder to fix. And most of us, we think our 2, 3, 4, 5 year old is an angel, right, mom? Right, dad? However, there are some challenges we may encounter, and sometimes people think, oh, it's innocent, oh, it's cute, they'll be fine. No, don't go into that rabbit hole. Good manners are always acceptable. Even when there are difficult times and our children are misbehaving, we want their behaviors to be on the up and up. So, the first one I want to talk about is defiance. Defiance is a word we don't use much, but basically it is that child that basically is not going to do what you say. They're going to be stubborn and they're not going to respect what you're telling them to do. Now, that's a challenge. That is something that has a lot to do with listening skills and also being able to direct your child. No, you don't run into the street. No, you will not be able to walk by yourself. You will hold my hand. And when your child is defiant, basically they're resisting or ignoring a direct order from you. It's not a request, it's an order. Then you're the one that has to address it. Because as they get older, the defiance will grow stronger. For example, at the dinner table, for those of us who do sit to have dinner together, there may be that resistance or ignoring you when you're telling them to eat a certain food item. You may not want them to eat all of it, but you want them to eat some of it because dessert may not come. Sometimes their feelings are considered and sometimes they're not. The second one is entitlement. The child that thinks they're entitled to play with and have in their possession all the toys in the classroom and nobody should touch the ones that they have is basically saying they are sensing entitlement. And sharing is so important in a child's world. And when we tell our children that all of these things are not needed, other children need to be able to participate, then, and especially that teacher in the classroom or the cousins that visit and are in your home, we want our children to understand that there's a difference between I want these or I need these. And being able to understand that entitlement is what's going on. Otherwise, they're going to expect whatever I want is what I'm going to get. And we never want to send that message to our children. We want them to have gratitude, to appreciate what they do have access to, what they're able to play with, what they are able to do. The third one, and all of us are familiar with this, are tantrums. Tantrums can be very severe or they can be mild, usually seen in a toddler or a preschooler. And basically, there's the screaming, the yelling, the crying, the flaying of the arms, maybe even hitting their head against something or stamping their feet. They're doing things to make noise and bring attention to themselves. Usually, that crying does not even bring out any tears. I always say, I don't see any tears. But it's bad behavior. It's behavior that's unacceptable. And how we handle their level of frustration is very important. We have to remain calm, even though it may be difficult, and even though they may be going out of control. So, in order to control that situation in a very respectful way, use words. And that's one thing I have done with my children. Instead of the and the crying and the yelling, use your words. And notice when they have to talk, they have to stop crying, they have to stop yelling. So, what is it that is your problem? Most of the time, it's because of the previous one, which is entitlement. They think they should be able to do something and they can't. Yes, we want to address their emotions. Yes, we want to address their behavior. But we also want to stop and we want them to stop. We want to take a deep breath. And sometimes you may have to ask your child to take a deep breath. And sometimes I have said, I'm going to give you this glass of water or this bottle of water, and I want you to take a couple of sips. That also will calm your child down and will allow them to breathe. Many times they think they're a victim when they're not. The next one, which is one that I had to deal with on a regular basis, is lying. One of the expressions my mother used to say years and years ago, she said, if a person lies, they will steal. And if they steal, they might kill. In other words, they're going to try to get something from someone. And if they're not able to steal it, oh, okay, I'll just get rid of them. I'll hurt them. And her whole thing was tell the truth. Even though it may be some information you don't want to tell, but every child will tell. We used to use the word fib, and in the African American culture, we would say you're telling a story. Literally, it's lying. And as parents, our children are watching us. So if we're not telling our right age, if we're not really being forthcoming with information, especially at the amusement park, how old is your child? Oh, he's 10. And your child says, no, mom, I'm 12. Of course, that price is different for the 12-year-old than the 10-year-old. Guess what? They're going to pick up your habit. So lying deliberately, purposely, telling the wrong information should not be tolerated. And you need to tell your child what the consequences are when they're telling that lie. And you have to follow through with those consequences immediately. And the last one is cheating. Cheating means you're doing something that is not fair. You're taking credit for something you didn't do. So, again, parents, our children are watching us. And whether it's your taxes, whether it's related to your mailing address for a child to be able to go to a certain school, they know what you're doing. It may be as simple as the card game or the board game of Monopoly. Cheating is never a good thing, mom and dad. Competition, excuse me, competition is part of who we are, but we do not want to cheat in order to win or in order to get over or in order to get benefits from a situation. Our children will mimic that behavior. When your child cheats, talk to them about it could result in jail time as they get older. It could result in harm to another individual. It could result in them being fired from a job. and not having a place to live. You fill out applications all the time. And cheating and lying kind of go hand in hand. But if you're trying to get over and not tell your real income so that you can get a certain benefit, that is cheating. So talk to your child, teach them a lesson, let them know the consequences. So these 7 habits are habits that we want to ensure that do not develop to be worse once your child becomes an adult. Because once they get older, teens, adulthood, it's harder to fix if it can be fixed at all. You have been listening to Parenting Tips with Dr. Glow on the WDKX Podcast Network, where the conversation never ends. Question: have you encountered any one of these 7 habits recently? If so, how are you handling it?